Hello, this is a guy who likes fanfiction and is too lazy to read, so here is the Blade Breaker's Daughters in audio form. Check the description for the links to the author. Chapter 6, New Tricks. Shay's birthday was yesterday, Byleth told her dad when he awoke. Huh? Gerald took a moment, blinking awake, then gave his daughter a confused look. Since when did you know when her birthday is? Since last year, Byleth explained, before a slight pout appeared on her face. I wanted to tell you, but you returned late on your mission. Ah, yeah, sorry about that. It probably wasn't a fair excuse, but after the job of clearing out those giant wolves went on much longer than expected, he couldn't help getting maybe a bit too excited for the feast he was offered. Especially with the high-quality booze they had. Turns out nobles were sometimes good for something. Did you two have fun yesterday? Yes, the bakery had some nice bread rolls. That's good, Gerald said, feeling relieved that the town he left them in was nice. Shay also wants to show you something, Byleth said, gesturing for him to follow her. Huh? A bit confused, Gerald felt her grab his hand and do her best to pull him out of the bed he was using. Which, well, Gerald was curious to see what was going on, so he followed along. Hey there, Captain, sir. I hope you're ready to be blown away. Shay greeted as she stood in the training field, her hands on a pair of training swords. All right, what am I looking at? My new style, she declared, before turning towards a training dummy and showing off some type of two-sword style she developed. She wasn't that bad, he had to admit as he watched how easily she swung each sword, delivering quick blow after blow to the dummy. It wasn't his type of thing at all, admittedly, but he'd always been built for heavy hits instead of this quick and light stuff. He did let out an impressed whistle when Shay took off the dummy's head with her offhand. Not bad. Not bad at all. Oh, wow, I didn't. Oh, thanks sir. She smiled brightly, before turning and leveling her sword at his daughter. Now, my fated rival, we shall. You're going to have to fix the headless dummy later though. It shouldn't be so funny to take the wind out of the kids' sails, but it was. Oh okay, but later. For now, Byleth, wait, where's Byleth? Over here, Byleth called out from the armory tent, where she'd just gotten a training sword and helmet for herself. I'm ready. You could at least let me finish issuing the challenge. Byleth stared. Are we going to fight now? Yes. We are. And I'm going to win this time. If you say so. Surprisingly enough, Shay actually put her coin where her mouth was for once. Gerald kept a close eye on things the whole time, because training gear or not, he didn't want the kids hurting each other, and he had to admit, Shay had definitely figured out something suitable for herself. Her fast movements were something Byleth had seen before, but adding the second sword into the mix threw her off enough that Gerald already made a mental note to change up his daughter's training. She was 14 already, so maybe he should see if the other mercs would be willing to spar. Either way, he clapped his hands together the instant he saw Shay catch Byleth's sword and get a solid strike in across the head. He tried not to react too badly as he saw his daughter hit the dirt, instead offering Shay a smile. Good work there, kid. Huh? Wait, I did it? I did it. Byleth. I did it. Shay practically squealed, her eyes bright and happy as she smiled down at her friend, before she frowned and nudged Byleth with her foot. Bye. Are you okay? Hey, bye. Gerald, having seen his daughter give Shay an annoyed look and then deliberately close her eyes, sighed in some exasperation. Byleth, don't play dead. She would have believed me, Byleth complained as she sat up. Shay huffed, elation turning to frustration as she tapped Byleth on the head with her sword. Don't do that. You made me worried. Sorry. Byleth pushed herself up, then reached up and patted Shay on her helmet. Good job. No, it doesn't work as well. You're shorter than me so it feels weird when you do it. She poked Shay's nose instead, making her squawk indignantly. Hey. Is that any way to treat someone older than you, huh? Your birthday was yesterday. The birthday you decided on. I won the privilege of being older by beating you. That was the agreement. Gerald raised an eyebrow. He wasn't sure what was going on, but he was also pretty sure, despite being taller than Byleth already and looking like she'd get even bigger as she grew into a lanky teen, Shay was probably a year younger than his daughter. Granted, he did guess that she was 10 when he first met her, so his view might be skewed. I want a rematch. And there was some unexpected stubbornness from Byleth. No. And Shay completely refused, dropping her swords in favor of sprinting in the opposite direction. Gerald couldn't help it. He laughed outright, especially when he saw the look of genuine offense on Byleth's face before she chased after her friend. Ha 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 ha. I guess I should do something for the kid's birthday, the other kid. Gerald frowned at himself. I should also come up with something to call Shay other than kid if I'm going to keep using that nickname for Byleth. So Captain, when are you letting us on a mission with you? Shay asked while she repaired the headless dummy. Byleth had finally caught her and dragged her back to fix it up, so Gerald was supervising. This again? How many times are you going to keep asking? Until you let us join. Come on, Bai and I are tough, so you're just wasting us by keeping us on the side. Gerald couldn't help but sigh at her response. Even if I did take you two along, it wouldn't be on our next mission. I may not like nobles, but I have to at least keep up appearances in front of a major noble. Ah. But that's more reason we should go. Byleth needs to know how to talk to nobles if she's going to take jobs, right? I'm not retiring anytime soon, kid. Yeah, but, eventually. You're old, right? So you gotta prepare. I'm old, but I'm not gray. Besides, even if I was quitting, which I'm not, I wouldn't take Byleth to meet account for her first noble negotiation. Nobles are prickly at the best of times, and the job we're taking is coming from one of the Alliance's leaders. He frowned in thought. At least I think he is. I'm not completely sure how that round table thing works. That's more reason why we should go then. Meeting a big noble is going to be great for our reputations. Shay, no. I understand you want to go, but it's just a bad idea right now. Shay grumbled under her breath and stepped away from the slightly more stable dummy with its head belted back on. They'd probably need a better fix if they actually wanted to keep its head on, but it would work for now. Well, what about the mission, huh? We could come along for that. Goddess save him from stubborn children. I'll have to see what it is first. He held up a hand to keep her from getting too excited. I'm not saying yes. I'm just saying if it turns out to be something easy, I might let you two watch. From a distance. With someone keeping an eye on you so you don't charge into the fray. I wouldn't do that. At his flat look, she relented, scuffing her boot in the dirt. I'll be good. All right. Now, let's see if we have anything that will keep this poor guy's head on. We should still have some nails around here. Okay. Shay said, still pouting. Though that stopped as Gerald gave her a pat on the head. Come on now, you're a good kid, I just want to make sure you and Byleth are fully prepared before you join the battlefield. I know, but you don't have to worry so much, Dad. That's not going to dash, what did you say? And it seemed Shay realized just what exactly she said since she suddenly stiffened. Shay, did you dash? Gerald raised his hand to catch the disembodied training dummy head that was thrown at him, taking a moment to stare at it, before he looked back up to see Shay running away from the training grounds. I'm not drunk enough for this. Gerald said, before unceremoniously dropping the head on the ground. Chapter 7, The First Mission. How do you think it's going? Shay asked, glancing up at Byleth. The other girl was standing beside her, her hand on a short spear as she looked out into the distance. Probably good. Papa is good at his job. That's true, he is. Shay shifted in place and squinted, trying to see if there were any poachers out on the fields or in the woods. Being a lookout is really boring. Is it? Yeah. It definitely is. We're just waiting until we see something. I guess. You're supposed to blow a whistle if we see something. That sounds interesting. But that's only if we see something, and like you said, with how good the captain is at his job, we probably won't see anything. Is everything okay? Aside from how bored I am. Did something happen with you and Papa? Huh? What do you mean? Shay asked, making it obvious something was wrong. You were being quiet back at the camp, even when Papa gave us the whistle and told us where to go. Well, that's just cause I ate something weird earlier. Oh, did you eat a bug? Why is that your first thought? I've eaten bugs before, Byleth explained. Were they any good? Not really. Did you know ants are spicy? They are? That's so weird. Yeah. Both girls paused, then looked at each other. Was that a scream? That wasn't you, they said in unison, before Shay frowned. Why would that be me? Wait. That was a scream. From the village. Yeah, it sounds like it. I didn't notice any, Shay. Shay was already halfway down the hill in a full sprint, heading for the village as quickly as she could. The mission was to protect the villagers, so she was going to do exactly that. Byleth, you handle the signal thing. I'll save everybody. Byleth barely heard what her friend said. Running away from someone didn't make it easy for them to hear what you're saying, funny enough. And even if she did properly hear what Shay said, the purple-haired girl forgot one important fact: she was the one with the whistle. Sauron Village was a fairly peaceful place most days. As a village of hunters, trappers, and traders, it wasn't unusual for the smell of blood to linger in places with how much freshly caught game tended to be brought through the area. That didn't mean things were violent though. Catching food and trading furs were natural parts of life. A grown man holding a sword to the throat of a young girl most definitely was not the natural state of affairs around there. Back off. Stay back all of you or the brat breathes through a new hole in her neck, threatened the poacher, his eyes wide and desperate as he backed up closer and closer to the village's stables. Let go of me. Shut it, brat, the poacher screeched, you're lucky I don't cut you open right here as vengeance for my comrades. Let her go, shouted one of the nearby villagers. A few had gathered at the commotion, though no one was willing to risk getting too close to the wild-eyed thug. Leonie didn't do anything to you. This little shit threatened me. She had a stick. I don't care. He moved the sword from the young girl's neck and leveled it at the closest villager. Now back off and let us get some steeds or I'll cut her bloody nose off, gyah. Whatever other threats he was going to make were cut off in a sharp scream as Shay rammed her hunting knife into the skinny man's side. His vest was barely padded and she could feel the blade sink in as she shoved him to the ground. The orange-haired girl fell away from the poacher, her eyes wide in shock and confusion as Shay pushed herself up, a bright grin on her face. Don't worry. I've got this. Whoa, how did you do that? Speed, strength, and plenty of training. Fia, goddess, fuck, screamed the poacher, clutching at the knife in his side, you little shit. You stabbed me. Ah, goddess, I'm dying. Eesh, he's really loud, Shay complained, before shaking it off. Well, anyways, hi there. I'm Shay, of Geralt's Mercenaries, and I. Ah, wait. Leonie interrupted, remembering something very important, there were two of. Some instinct prompted Shay to move, tackling Leonie out of the way just in time as an axe crashed down into the ground where she'd been sitting. Damn it, Lloyd, you were supposed to keep them distracted, growled the larger, bulkier, greasy-haired poacher, scowling over at his thinner, balding comrade as he ripped the axe out of the dirt. Screw you, Vincent. I have a knife in my guts. That's a really big guy, Shay muttered under her breath. She glanced back at the orange-haired girl and gave her a light push. Come on, get moving. Wait. What about you? Don't worry, I know exactly what I'm doing. Shay lied. Leonie didn't know that though, so she just nodded with some visible hesitation and concern, before running over to the villagers currently hanging back, none willing to get close to the axe-wielding brute. Shay, meanwhile, did the logical thing for herself to do in this situation and drew the sword at her hip. Geralt had given her a few lessons on handling live steel over the months, so she knew what she was doing. Well, she knew what she was doing in handling a sword. Facing off against a man twice her size. Vincent seemed to notice her hesitation from the scoff he let out. You're joking. A pipsqueak like you thinks she can take me? You might have gotten my bud with that cheap shot, but you're not getting one on me. I don't need a cheap shot to take down someone like you. He barked a laugh. You've got a spine, kid. It's almost a shame I gotta tear it out. No, it's not. Lloyd shouted, just kill her already. Despite his demands, Shay moved first, lunging for the big man with some quick stabs at his chest that he blocked with the blade of his axe. She dodged back as he swung in retaliation and tried to maneuver around him, using her smaller size and quicker speed to find a gap in his defense. Then he backhanded her and she remembered she shouldn't keep her eyes on just his weapon. His fist crashed into the side of her head with the force of a boulder, sending her down before his hand went around her throat and he slammed her up against the wall of the stable, driving the air from her lungs in a wheezing choke. Too bad, brat, he taunted as she struggled, kicking at his chest and pulling at his thick fingers. A few more years, and you might have been trouble. You won't have to worry about that now though. His grip tightened and she wheezed again, trying to breathe under the crushing force squeezing down on her neck. Black spots were starting to fill her vision and she could feel her heart beating faster and faster, even as her struggles were starting to slow. She couldn't die here, not like this, but it was getting so hard to keep going. No. No, she refused to think like that. There had to be a way out, there had to be something. A strange feeling came over her for a moment, a weird feeling of strength and motion, like something inside her was trying to get out. Then she felt the grip around her neck loosen. Shay dropped to the ground, coughing and gasping as her lungs ached for air. Then the headless body of Vincent the poacher collapsed to the ground a second later and Shay saw Byleth's face in front of her own as the blue-haired girl looked her over. There's bruising. I have a vulnerary, it'll help. Can you drink it now? Byleth asked. Her eyes were completely on Shay, checking what damages her friend had suffered, but Shay was more focused on the sword in Byleth's grip. She dimly recognized it as the sword the other poacher, Lloyd, had been wielding, and there was blood dripping down the blade. Byleth had grabbed it and cleaved Vincent's head off in one stroke. That was, wow. Wow, Shay mumbled, before noticing Byleth's frown. Are you concussed? How many fingers am I holding up? That's the hilt of a sword. Incorrect, I had 2 fingers extended. We should get you checked out. You little shits, if I'm going down, I'm taking you both with me, the somehow still alive second poacher, Lloyd, snarled as he pushed himself to his feet and ripped the knife out of his side. He made it 2 paces before the logical thing happened. No, he didn't die of blood loss, though he likely would have in a few more seconds. No, instead a thrown spear essentially obliterated his head as Geralt arrived on the scene. See Captain Dash. Are you two okay? Geralt asked, worry evident in his voice as he looked down at them. Why yes, sir. I checked her, she's okay. At their responses, Geralt nodded, seeming relieved before his features hardened. What do you think you're doing? I told you to stay on lookout. Geralt shouted, making Shay stiffen. Sorry, Sir Dash. I don't want to hear an apology, I want an explanation, Geralt stated, staring down at the two. Well, Sir Dash. It's my fault, I heard someone screaming in the town and rushed ahead. Byleth said, trying to take the blame for Shay. Don't lie, I know you're not the type to do that, Geralt retorted, not believing her for a moment. Look, we'll talk about this later. For now, both of you head back to camp, and I better see you two there when I head by later. Shay cringed at the captain's obvious anger and frustration, but didn't resist as Byleth helped her to her feet. Sorry. He'd already moved away by that point, heading over to the poacher's corpse to pull his lance free from the ruined skull, but Byleth gave her a pat on the back. It will be okay. MNH, are you sure? I've never seen him mad like that. Yeah, it's fine. Papa just wants us to be safe. Byleth gave Shay a slight smile. She still wasn't that good at them, but the small smile was still reassuring. Let's go back to camp. We can get something to eat. Shay snorted, brushing at her eyes. Is food the only thing you think about? I think about lots of things. Food is important. Including bugs. Most food is important. Geralt was a man who had lived far longer than most people would. He had been in countless battles and faced immeasurable challenges. Even so, when he was stressed, he had one response: find the nearest mug of ale. And, despite the mess that had occurred, the villagers of Sauron were more than happy to offer him and his mercenaries a feast. The ale might not have been the best, but the villagers really knew their stuff when it came to food. Guess it must come with the territory of being a hunting village. Tearing into a chunk of boar meat, Geralt savored the flavor, before washing it down with some ale. Truly, it was the simple rewards that made being a merc worth it. "See Captain Geralt," came a young voice, catching his attention. Glancing over, Geralt saw a young girl, Leonie if he remembered correctly, standing behind him. "Did you need something?" "I wanted to say, thank you for saving us," Leonie said, before bowing to him. "I was just doing my job," Geralt responded as he turned to face her. "Still, you're a hero. You haven't even been here for long and you took out the poachers no problem, and the way you threw that spear was super cool. You didn't even hesitate to save those two girls." "They wouldn't have needed saving if they actually listened to my orders," Geralt muttered. They were just trying to save me." "Well, Shay was anyway." Leonie muttered the last part. Still, it was my fault for getting captured. Not sure how you getting held hostage can be your fault. I might have tried to fend the poacher off when he arrived. I thought I could have been a hero like you," Leonie said, before trying to shake her unease and seem confident. But I wanted to ask if you could make me your apprentice." Geralt really needed to drink more. Grabbing his mug, Geralt downed what remained before he answered. "Sorry kid, I'm not looking for an apprentice." Then what about those two girls?" "They don't look any older than me." "They're not my apprentices, they're my kids," Geralt responded, not really thinking about his response in his drunken state. "Wait, Captain, Shay is actually your kid?" one of his mercs asked, butting in. Upon being asked that, Geralt paused, and began to think about Shay. Sure, she might have been more than a handful, but he couldn't help but think of how fond he was of the brat. And while Byleth might have learned a few bad lessons from her, Shay had been a good influence overall. "Yeah, she's my kid," he decided. It wasn't like he needed anything official to adopt her. "Ah, damn it, I lost the bet," the merc yelled, slamming his hands on the table. "What bet?" "See Captain." Leonie spoke up before Geralt could get his answer. "Even if you aren't looking for an apprentice, are you sure I can't join your group? Anyone around here can tell you how good of a hunter I am." Geralt couldn't help but let out a sigh at her pleading eyes. "Look, I'm not going to take you along." He raised a hand before she could speak. "But, we were hired to take care of the poachers, and it would look bad on me if I left without making sure they were completely dealt with. So I might stick around for a few days if you want to learn a few things." Leonie immediately lit up, smiling bright and happy. "I won't let you down, Captain." Geralt tried not to groan. Something about this felt way too familiar and he was far too sober to deal with it. Chapter 8, The Apprentice. "Hello. My name is Leonie Pinelli, and I'm going to be Captain Geralt's new apprentice," greeted the new girl on the training field, her bright and eager expression completely at odds with Geralt's visible hangover and exhaustion. "I thought I said I wasn't looking for an apprentice," Geralt said, rubbing his head as he tried to soothe his headache. "Ah, right, sorry Captain," Leonie said, still sounding very eager as she stood before Shay and Byleth, both of whom seemed unsure of what was going on. Which, right, they still hadn't talked about what had happened at the village the day prior. "Papa, is everything okay?" Byleth asked, deciding to speak up as Shay shifted in place. "Everything is okay, Leonie is just going to be joining us for training while we're here," Geralt said, before glancing at Shay. "We can talk about what happened after training." "Okay. Now then, to start, Leonie, what weapons are you good with?" Geralt asked, addressing the new girl. "I'm really good with the bow, Captain." "Ah, but I would love to learn how to use the spear." "Is that so? In that case, I can certainly help teach you a thing or two. You kids mind helping her out with the training gear?" Geralt asked his two kids. After a moment, Byleth nodded, walking over with Shay to help Leonie get set up. They weren't planning to spar, at least not immediately, so some basic gloves and padding would be fine for protection. "So what's it like fighting with Captain Geralt?" Leonie asked, smiling brightly at Byleth. We usually stay at the camp, Byleth answered in her usual monotone, and Gerald fought back a wince at how obviously Leonie frowned. Really? Well, you have to do some interesting stuff around here. Yeah, we do. Here, you'll want one of these ones, they're shorter and easier to use. Byleth handed Leonie one of the training spears, but the new girl's frown didn't disappear. In fact, she looked more annoyed at Byleth's flat, matter-of-fact replies. We mostly help out around, Shay spoke up, some of her nerves fading as she talked. It's mostly chores, but every bit is important to keep the camp running. Heh, I can imagine. And Leonie's mood immediately turned right around. Gerald knew Byleth wasn't the best with new people, but since things turned out well with Shay, well, maybe he was just getting in his own head here. Alright, now that you've got your weapon, let's work on your form, he said, deciding to interrupt the socializing. Yes, Captain. Leonie replied. She snapped to attention in an instant, so she had that going for her at least. It had been a while since Gerald worked with someone who didn't have a foundation to work off of. Shay picked things up quickly, especially with the training she got in her previous merc bands, and he helped Byleth train from the moment she could hold a sword steady. And that wasn't even mentioning the recruits he'd had to deal with back in the day. Leonie clearly had some training, but it was a hunter, not a lancer. You want the tip to stay up, pointed towards their face like this. That keeps your head protected and lets you move it easier. Right hand here, left hand down here, you guide with your right and push with your left. Keep your right foot forward, we'll work on footwork once we get the arm work down. The butt should be by your hip, the tip at eye level. Like I said, aim for the face, not the neck, it's easier to maneuver and no one wants to get stabbed in the face. He did still know what he was doing though. Short thrust, you partially extend your arm but keep your elbow bent. Long thrust, you extend it all the way. Keep your footing firm. You don't need to stay in place, but you do need to be steady. Low thrusts are an option, but remember, most people are going to armor their chest and you need to be prepared for how it feels to punch into that. The main point to lances is thrusting. You don't want to swing it like it's a blade for your first option, even if you're handling something like a halberd. If you get deflected, you can always bring it around for a slash, much easier than trying to thrust again. And Leonie was taking to the lesson quickly enough. The girl might be green, but she was willing to learn and didn't even complain when he made it clear he expected at least 20 reps against a dummy to make sure she had the basic thrust down. Shay and Byleth were hanging around nearby, and, right, he really should address things. Kid, Byleth, keep an eye on Leonie. I need to talk to Shay. Okay. Nodding, Byleth took a position nearby to keep an eye on Leonie as Gerald and Shay stepped away. Did you need something, sir? Shay asked, nervousness evident in her voice. Clearing his throat, Gerald tried his best not to speak too roughly. Can you tell me why you rushed in yesterday? Well, it's just. I'm not mad, I just want to hear why. I didn't really think, I just heard someone screaming so I wanted to go help, and when I got there, I thought if I saved the day, it would prove to you that we don't need to be babied anymore, Shay explained, unable to look him in the eye. And why didn't you use the whistle? And that got Shay to stiffen. I, kinda, told Byleth to use it, but I forgot I was the one who had it. Right. Sorry, sir. You don't need to apologize, Gerald said, trying to think about the right thing to say. I'm not trying to baby you, but when you're a mercenary a single mistake can lead to your death. Hell, if you hadn't been pushing for it so hard, I probably wouldn't have let you and Byleth join a mission for another 2 years. T2. Shay asked incredulously. Yes, 2, likely 3 if this is how your first mission went. Gerald probably shouldn't have been amused at Shay blanching. But I just want to make sure you two are ready. I mean, you're both my kids. Huh. Thankfully for Shay, the two of them got interrupted by Leonie letting out a yelp. Looking over, they saw the young hunter on the floor, having seemingly gotten knocked over by Byleth. Hey, who said you two could spar? Gerald asked, approaching the two to help Leonie up. She wanted to, Byleth answered, earning a glare from Leonie. Yeah, I did, and she cheated. She kicked my legs out from under me. That's cheating. Shay asked from behind Geralt. Sighing, Geralt shook his head. Leonie, if there's one thing you learn from me, then it's this. There's no such thing as cheating when it comes to a fight. It's better to play dirty and win, than it is to play fair and lose. She blinked. Really? Yeah, honor doesn't mean anything if you're dead. As far as we're concerned, a merc's honor is whether they can complete a job or not. Course, you still have to look out for yourself. If a noble is treating you poorly, there's no reason to stay, and if a client dies, you don't have an obligation to avenge them. But, what about your reputation? Well, that's up to you. What's more important, your life or your rep? Leonie frowned. But you still try to help people, right? Of course, there's nothing wrong with that. Just make sure you're getting paid for it, he joked. Well, half joked. Now let's try that again. Shay, you mind jumping in? Huh, oh. Why yeah, you got it, sir. She saluted and picked up a training sword, moving to the field to face off against Leonie. Remember Leonie, a spear gives you more reach, Geralt called out. You'll always have an advantage against someone with a sword so long as you remember that. Understood. Geralt settled back, watching the two girls face off. After a moment, Byleth moved over to his side and he gave her a glance, waiting to see if she wanted to talk. Is she my sister? Well, that wasn't what he expected her to ask. Do you want her to be? Yeah. I've never had a sister. She's nice. Kind of stupid though. Geralt bit back a laugh at his kid's blunt summary. She's not a bad kid. I never thought I'd wind up adopting another kid though. It's a strange thought. Hey, Shay is my sister now, right? She wasn't my sister before. Okay, now he was just confused. Could you explain that one to me? Some of the mercenaries were betting on if Shay was your bastard. He nearly choked on his own spit. Is a bastard a secret daughter? Shay isn't my secret daughter, kid. You're the one that found her, remember? Huh. That's true. She looked thoughtful, then looked up at him again. When was I born? The 20th of Horsebow. Where was this going? What year? Geralt raised an eyebrow at her sudden curiosity, then considered if he should answer the question truthfully or not. There probably wasn't any harm in it. It wasn't like he'd be running into anyone from the church anytime soon. 11:59. She seemed to be counting something from how she moved her fingers. I'm 14 then. How old is Shay? You're asking a lot of questions today. Please answer. Well, I don't know. I was assuming she's probably a year younger than you, at least. Well, he thought she was 3 years younger at first, but that didn't seem too likely now. So I'm older. Good. He really had no idea what his kid was thinking sometimes. Chapter 9, Time to Travel. They stuck around Sauron for a few more days. Geralt and some slightly scuffed members of his band, the ones who needed to learn not to bet on his personal life and to watch their language around the kids, kept up on searching around for any remaining poachers while Byleth and Shay helped out with training their father's new apprentice. Geralt still chipped in with Leonie's training, of course, but his kids made for decent sparring partners for the young girl. Byleth also took to helping with some surprising, if muted, enthusiasm. She was the one most often directing the two younger girls, and she was competent enough with a lance to show Leonie how best to use it when Geralt wasn't available, though the redhead wasn't especially receptive to what she saw as Byleth's criticism of her skills. As for Shay, she was grounded. No going into the village unless it was with Geralt, and she was completely locked down to the camp otherwise. Not that she protested much. She messed up, so she was willing to take her punishment. Even if it was a really boring one. Besides, Leonie was still fun for her to spar with, so it wasn't like she was completely bored. Eventually though, the time to move on came. Are you sure you can't stay for a little longer? Leonie asked, pouting as she looked up at Geralt. Sorry kid, a merc has to make a living, and we still have to go receive our payment from the count. Geralt said, really not feeling good about making a kid sad. Then let me come with you. And who's gonna take care of your old man if you come with us? Geralt asked, making Leonie pause before she frowned. All right. Hey, come on now. No need to be sad. Shay said, trying to cheer her up. There'll always be a place for you here when you grow up. You'll get really strong one day, Byleth added. I am already strong. Even stronger. Leonie really wasn't sure if she was trying to cheer her up or not. Now then, before we leave, we did have some stuff we wanted to give you, Geralt said, nudging his kids forward a bit. Oh, right. Here, it's from Byleth and me. Shay said with a grin, as she pulled out a training weight while Byleth pulled out a hunting dagger. I hope you like it. Oh, thanks. The training weight was very appreciated, though Leonie couldn't help but wonder about the dagger. She already had one, even if it was an old one. And here, I made it myself. Crouching down, Geralt handed her a wooden charm, making Leonie beam. Thank you, Captain. I'll make sure to take care of it. Heh, don't worry about it if you don't. Just make sure to take care of yourself. Geralt said, with a slight smile. Of course, Captain. Leonie saluted, before looking at the two sisters. I'll make sure to keep you to that promise, Shay. And you better watch out, Byleth. I'll get strong enough to beat you. Looking forward to it, Byleth said, her tone even as ever, though Shay did frown for a moment. As they left, Leonie began to tearfully wave them goodbye, as the family waved back, heading to where the gold may take them. She needs to get her own rival, Shay said a day after they had left Sauron village, while she and Byleth waited for Geralt to come back with the payment from the Count. Who does? Leonie. She's nice and all, but she was clearly trying to make you her rival and you're my rival. Shay explained, clearly miffed. It's okay, you're still my rival, Byleth said, patting her on the head, and my little sister. Hey, we still don't know if you really are the older one. Dad thought I was 10 when we met, so he might be wrong about how old I am. You don't know how old you are. You might be 10. It's been a year. I'm definitely not 10. 11 then. Shay glared at her newly official sister, before glancing up when she noticed Geralt walking back into camp. Dad. Tell Byleth I'm not 11. Hi to you too, Shay. Byleth, don't tease your sister. Okay. Why do you have a book? Byleth asked, because Geralt did indeed have a book under his arm. 2 books, actually. I asked Count Gloucester if he knew anything about studying magic and he gave me them for free. Well, to be specific, he said they were part of my pay, but he still gave me the full price in gold too, so it was a decent deal all around. Oh wow. The Count sounds super generous. Wait, why do you have magic books? Shay asked. Because I figured it was about time to follow up on the fact that you know how to use magic. It might have taken a while, but better late than never, right? Really? Shay asked, suddenly very excited. Yes, but you know the rules. No practicing without supervision, Shay responded, having heard it plenty of times. Good. He handed the books over. Now, I hope you're ready for a march, cause we're headed to Empire territory. Huh? Why are we going there? Apparently we did a good enough job with those poachers near Sauron that Count Gloucester decided to help us out with some more work, Geralt answered. He had some recommendations for what nobles might be looking for mercenaries. Wow, he must really like you. That or he wants some Empire nobles to owe him. He shrugged. Either way, it means more work for everyone, so let's get to packing up. Sir, yes sir. Shay saluted, before scurrying over to show Byleth her new books. And then get to packing up afterwards, of course. It wasn't unusual for the Geralt mercenaries to be on the road. They were a traveling mercenary band, after all, but it was the first time they'd traveled from one nation to another while Shay was a part of their group, and the young girl was pretty excited to visit a brand new country. Maybe overly excited, given how much she was pestering the other mercs for details on the Empire of Adrestia. Come on, can't you tell me anything? Shay asked as she flitted about the mercenaries. You're gonna tire yourself out if you keep moving around like that. Geralt said, glancing back at the still-moving girl. But I want to know about where we're going. This is my first time out of the Alliance. Heh, guess you should take your kids out more, Victor said, teasing the captain from his place in the procession. Hey, aren't you from the Empire? Yeah, I used to work in HRYM territory. Good, you can answer all of Shay's questions, Geralt said, essentially dropping his kid on the Merc. Oh, what's HRYM like? Shay asked, practically bouncing on her feet. Sighing as he realized his mistake, Victor shrugged. Well, don't expect much from it. Haven't been there since the Emperor decided to wipe out the HRYM family. Huh. I was only a guard, so I don't know all the details, but House HRYM wanted to join the Alliance, and even tried to fight for its freedom. Course, the Emperor wasn't happy about that and squashed them. I decided to get out of there before things got bad. The mercenary let out a chuckle as he remembered his past. My only regret is that I didn't loot the place before leaving. Don't make me smack you, Geralt said with a sigh. Heh, sorry boss. Anyways, where was I? Oh yeah, after the HRYM house got squashed, the other nobles weren't that happy with the Emperor, leading to them leading a revolt against him. Don't know all the details about that though, other than apparently the Duke von Aegir being in charge of HRYM now. Oh wow, the Empire seems like a messy place. Well, it's not all bad. There's the Opera House in Inver for example. I only ever went to it when I was guarding a noble, but the shows there are great. There was this one diva in particular who was amazing, they called her the Divine Songstress. Should try to see if she's still around, especially if she's still as hot as before. That last comment got Geralt to smack him on the back of his bald head. Yeah alright, fair, Victor conceded. What was it like being a guard? Byleth asked. There was a slight hitch in the march as the mercenaries registered that the captain's normally incurious kid actually asked a question unprompted. Even one of the horses glanced back at her. Not that interesting. I mostly patrolled the town, kept my eyes out for trouble, and took tons of bribes. You were a corrupt guard? Shay asked, sounding fascinated. Oh, hilariously corrupt. I probably took more bribes than anyone else in the guard. Half the time I wound up getting conflicting bribes, like, don't look this way, from one guy and, do look that way, from another, and I still took them. Wouldn't you get in trouble for that? Nah, I was never caught. I've got one of those faces nobody recognizes, which makes it really easy. Victor, don't teach my kids anything weird, Geralt warned. Hey, they're asking. Actually, here's something I can tell you squirts, coming from a veteran merc to a couple of novices. He smirked slightly at seeing Shay immediately scowl, though the real delight was seeing Byleth shoot him an offended glare. When it comes to the battlefield, always remember that nobles are always more valuable than commoners. Huh? Wait, why? Because nobles are worth way more as hostages. That earned him another smack from Geralt. Ah, Kman, that one's actually good to know. Nobles get upset if some commoner kills one of their type, so going for the capture is just good for living long. There were some noises of agreement from the other mercenaries and even Byleth looked thoughtful for a moment, though Shay still looked mullish. That's not how you phrased that at all, she complained, earning a laugh from the shifty merc. Don't get into the mercenary business if you're upset about shady business. Though, boss, you remember that Duke guy I mentioned? Duke Aegir. Yeah. Don't take jobs from him. That's just my thoughts there. Man's a snake. Geralt gave him a glance. I didn't think you had principles. I've got one, and that's don't get fuck. He glanced at Shay, then cleared his throat. Don't get cheated, and he's a cheat. I'll keep it in mind. That's all I'm asking. How's he a cheat? Shay asked, earlier annoyance turning back to curiosity. Lots of reasons, squirt. Biggest is that, somehow, he winds up not only in charge of HRYM after the Emperor squashes the Viscount, but is the guy to incite the insurrection. Sure, they say all 6 great houses were in on it, but it's really funny he's the one winding up on top every time something goes wrong. Hey, what are the great houses? And what do you mean by insurrection? How's that work? And hey, why do some nobles have Von in their names but others don't? Victor glanced at the child pestering him with questions, then turned his gaze towards his captain, who utterly refused to meet his eyes. Geralt loved his kids, but if he had the opportunity to have someone else answering Shay's questions, well, he considered himself a generally decent guy. Not decent enough to step in here though. Chapter 10, Mastering Magic. Okay. Make sure to watch carefully. Dad says you're my spotter. Shay called out to her sister, who was sitting on one end of the new camp's sparring field. There were some mercenaries around, but most were busy with their dad, out hunting down a giant wolf pack for one of the lords living in the Empire's northeast corner. Byleth tilted her head from where she sat, then glanced at the book on the ground next to her, titled, The Beginnings of Sorcery, A Primer on Magic, Vol 1. Okay. I think you should read your book first. Huh? Oh, that book. I can do that later. This is the magic book. Shay held up the tome in her hands, a simple brown and gray book. It didn't look magical, especially compared to the fancy bright red cover the primer had, which was even decorated with little silver flames in the corners. If you say so. Byleth decided to pick up the primer and sat it in her lap as she watched Shay proudly face off against a very fearsome straw dummy. Behold! The power of ice, she declared, and thrusted her hand forward. A small puff of frost poofed from her palm. Byleth clapped, politely. Don't clap. That was supposed to be an ice blast. Ice blast. That time, she managed a tiny icicle that launched from her palm and impacted the ground. Okay, that was maybe better, don't clap. No clapping. Byleth paused, her hands in position to applaud, then lowered her hands to her lap again, where they rested on the book. She considered things, then cracked the book open. The beginning was simple enough. It said some things about magic being part of the natural world, then went into how there were two major types of magic, white and black. White magic was based in faith, and black magic was based in reason. As for what that actually meant, apparently reason was magic based on a person enforcing their will on the world, while faith was magic drawn from and empowered by the user's faith in the goddess. Shay, what's the goddess? Huh. Shay blinked at her sister, then waved her hand to scatter away the ice that had grown on her fingers. That's annoying. Anyway, the goddess is the lady that created the whole world and everything in it. Oh, okay. Do you need help? I know what I'm doing. Mom taught me how to use magic. And how long ago was that? A few years ago, but I'm good. Okay, do you mind if I read to myself? Sure, just make sure to keep watching me too. Nodding in return, Byleth began to read while making sure to glance up as Shay kept practicing. While it seemed this book would mainly focus on reason magic, with a small note saying to purchase Volume 2 for a focus on faith magic, it did give a description about the differences in magic. Such as where reason magic was about channeling the magic around you, faith was about channeling the magic within you. Continuing on, it explained that magic was a very step-by-step process, and that these primers would assist in shortening the time between those steps. So I have to imagine the sigil first. Byleth said aloud, acting like she was talking to herself instead of to Shay, whose current icicle broke apart before it could be launched. Sigil, Shay mumbled, before deciding to open up her tome again. Okay, there's different symbols. In the common school of thought, reason magic can be divided into 4 major elements, Byleth continued, each with their own symbology. These elements are commonly held to be fire, thunder, wind, and ice. Knew that part already. Hey Shay, they have a picture of the common sigils on this page. Shay looked over at Byleth, who had held up the book to show the artistically drawn symbols in question, and despite herself, Shay immediately looked at the sigil for the most basic ice spell. Oh, so that's what it, whatever. They have fancy symbols in this book too. I know, I just thought I would show you. Shay huffed, a little annoyed, before turning and raising a hand. Ice. That time, a symbol started to form in front of Shay's hand instead of just a shard of ice, but she still only managed a slightly larger puff of frost. MRRH. To call upon each element properly, one must envisage the result they desire within their mind. Black magic draws upon the inherent magic of the world, and it must be channeled properly. That's interesting. It says for ice magic, you need to draw on feelings of the cold, and it works best for people already familiar with the concept. Byleth glanced up at Shay, who was pretending not to listen, and then back at the book. Also, the most basic ice spell is called Blizzard. Okay, Shay thought back, picturing cold winters on the mountains she came from, and held her hand out, keeping both that thought and the image of the sigil in her mind. Blizzard. In a flash of white and blue light, the dummy was both frozen and pierced as spikes of ice erupted up from the point the spell hit. Ah! I did it! I did it! Byleth, I did it! Shay yelled, a bright, happy smile on her face at the gruesome demise of the unfortunate training dummy. Good, I knew you could. Shay's face reddened before she smiled even brighter. She promptly hurried over to her older sister and grabbed her wrist to pull her up. Okay, now you do it. Yeah. I want to see what you can do. I haven't tried to use magic before. Yeah, and? I want to see what you can do. Byleth tilted her head in thought, then nodded. She had no idea what she was doing, so she might as well give it a try. Okay. Can I have your tome? The primer says having a focus helps. Oh, sure. Shay happily handed it over, before subtly taking the primer from Byleth in return so she could start pouring through it. Byleth felt her lips twitch in some amusement at the sight, before she faced off against one of the less frozen dummies on the field. She wasn't completely sure what she was doing, but the primer said all mages had an inherent affinity for one element or another. The easiest way to figure out what it was to just relax and think of what came naturally. So as Byleth stretched out her hand and closed her eyes, she found herself picturing flames. The warmth of the campfire beside her dad and Shay, the heat of summer bearing down on her, and the first time she saw a building lit ablaze by bandits. Fire, she intoned, and she opened her eyes as a crimson sigil formed in front of her hand and a ball of pure flames erupted from it, impacting the dummy and blowing it apart entirely into flaming scraps of cloth and straw. Whoa! Shay exclaimed, eyes bright with excitement. Oh shit! Yelped a nearby mercenary who had most definitely just been working nearby and not surreptitiously ordered by the girl's father to keep an eye on their practice so they didn't set the camp on fire. If he did do that though, such foresight would have been very fortuitous, as the mercenary managed to douse the flames before they could set anything ablaze. Suffice to say, Byleth and Shay got a bit of a lecture on fire safety. Apparently ice magic used to be considered a type of wind magic, Byleth noted, reading from the primer again while Shay continued practicing blasting some slightly hardier wooden dummies with ice shards. Byleth wasn't allowed to keep practicing with those yet, mostly because Dalton, the merc that was supervising but pretending not to be, was pretty sure wood would be even worse to set on fire. What? Why? Shay asked, half distracted, which wound up sending the ice spike flying off into the tree line. Oh, oops. Careful. Gertrude can fix a lot but she can't bring an eye back if you stab it out. Dalton called from where he was sitting and whittling some figurines. Byleth made a mental note of that. If Shay was right and she was going to take over the band someday, she should know what her troops did for hobbies, right? Should she ask when Dalton's birthday was? It might be nice to get him something. Hey. Bye. What do you mean about the ice thing? Oh, right. Byleth glanced at Shay. I think it's because wind is cold. Or something like that. There's also something about some people thinking the elements line up to the saints. Dalton, what are the saints? Wait, how do you not know? No, wait, yeah, okay, I guess it would make sense you don't know. Your pops doesn't like the church much and everyone would probably assume you already know, the mercenary shrugged. The four saints are the followers of Saint Cyros, who saved Fodlan from the evil King Nemesis 1,000 years ago. They helped found the Empire and did a bunch of other important stuff. Oh, okay. That made sense to her. She didn't know who Cyros or Nemesis were, but she could ask her dad later. So what was that about the saints and the elements? Shay asked. Just a side note about them being associated in religious texts. It's not very specific. There's also some stuff about dark magic, which I guess isn't regular reason magic. It isn't? Why not? 'Cause it's dark, Dalton spoke up, speaking as somebody who's actually gone up against a dark mage. Dark magic's nasty. It's all about causing pain and doing damage above everything else. Though, I guess that's true of all black magic? But you can use fire to light a fire, so. He trailed off, thinking, while Byleth continued to read. Dark magic is not inherently evil, though some hold it to be the natural opposite of the light of the goddess. Where light may heal as well as harm, darkness is meant solely to damage and thus is the favored art of spellcasters intent on reaching new heights of power and destruction. Oh, that sounds really cool. Shay immediately said. Well, even if it sounds cool, you should be careful. That type of magic can also be called curse magic, and I don't know about you two, but that seems like it can backfire. Dalton piped in as he finished a figurine. And even then, it's pretty rare. The church isn't exactly a fan of it, so it's not easy to find info on it. Ah, seriously? Yeah, it's not exactly banned, but it's frowned on. Frowning a bit, Shay focused back on the dummy and began to think. Shay. A bit confused, Byleth looked up at her younger sister as she stood there for a moment, before seeing Shay raise her hand. And, rather than the white sigil that appeared before, a purple one appeared in a single, dark spike launched forward, missing the dummy as it lodged itself into a tree. Yes. Look. I did, was as far as Shay got before the spike suddenly exploded, sending chunks of wood flying all over as the three of them instinctively ducked. After a second, Dalton popped his head up first. He stared at the blackened ruin of what once was a decently sized tree. The wood wasn't even burnt, that he could see, it looked more like it had somehow been leached of life, leaving behind withered, dried wood where it was struck. A second later, Byleth took a look, followed by a sheepish-looking Shay. Dalton stared at the ruin for a few more seconds, then looked at the purple-haired girl, who winced and ducked her head. You know I'm going to have to tell your pops about this, right? Do you have to? He looked back at the blown-apart tree. A butterfly landed on one of the pieces of blackened wood and immediately turned to dust. Yeah. Might need to get a priest too. Suffice to say, again, Shay was banned from using dark magic after Geralt got back. Though, when he did get back, the captain/namesake of Geralt's mercenaries had some interesting news to report. We're going to be heading to Inver for a bit. Inver? The huge city? Shay asked over dinner, staring at her adoptive father in curiosity and confusion. Yeah, the capital of the empire. We're going to be escorting a merchant caravan. I wouldn't normally bring us around a capital, too much chance of getting caught up in some noble, royal, or imperial nonsense, but it's paying a lot and, he looked sad for a second, at least to Byleth's eyes, before he tried to smile. It's something I've wanted to do. I hope you two don't mind. No way. Shay beamed, eager and enthusiastic. This is going to be great. I've never been to a city, and especially not a capital. I heard Derdriu, back in the Alliance, is enormous. Oh, but it's by the water and, wait, is Inver by water? Byleth watched her younger sister launch into another volley of questions for their exasperated father and felt a slight smile come to her face. She was getting better at those these days. Though, she felt a little curious for once. Why did her father look sad? What was in Inver that he wanted to do? Did it have something to do with her mother? She hadn't asked more after learning her mother's name. It looked like it hurt her father to talk about, and she was content to know that little bit about her, but, if there was a chance Citrai had something to do with Geralt's melancholy, then Byleth was going to find out about it. It just felt right to do. Check the description for the links to the author.